Okay. Can you hear me? Wow. Woo! Wow. I don't know. Thank you very much for coming here. So let's start the first slide. Where are we? It's a bit too loud. There's an echo. Yes. Okay. Hey, okay, so nice to meet you all. Who's here for the first time at UX Night? Okay, pretty good, maybe 50%. And who's here 2 times? Ah, okay, just a little bit. Okay, so thanks for coming. Nice to meet you all. I'm very excited. It's been a long time in the making. Ah, I should use this one. Okay, so UX Night and Vinted. And I want to thank Vinted for hosting us. I want to really clap for this. Maybe, Jonas, can you come for a moment? Jonas is one of my co-creator of this evening. Tell us, yeah, what's up?
Welcome everyone, what's up? It's our 3rd edition or 4th?
Yeah,
it's a 3rd edition. I love to see that the interest is still there. As long as it's there, we'll keep on doing these. So we have 3 great talks today. Avi will talk more about it, but I have one request. Be active. Don't just listen, participate, ask questions, don't shy away. The idea is to mingle and hang around. Stay after the event, meet the people. It's gonna be awesome. And the next announcement, we're gonna do another one this year. 4th edition, this one's gonna be in Kaunas in late November. So more news on that later. All right, without further ado, have a great event, and again, please be active.
Okay. Thank you, thank you. So be active meaning that, okay, I will explain everything about the active part in a second. Okay. So what is a UX salon, basically? In many languages, the word salon means a living room. And when I first thought about this idea, I wanted to create a living room, a place, a space where people come and learn from each other, and it should be very casual. So the idea of the salon is really to have a presentation, and right after the presentation, we will all kind of gather here in the living room and ask questions, interact with each other, make it casual. This is the whole idea of the salon. So, just because we're all here, I wanted to know, because it's also a networking opportunity, if anyone here is looking to hire designers. Anyone is looking to hire people? You, okay, maybe you can, come on. So tell us, so Agnes is our first speakers. Tell us, yes, who are you looking to hire?
I'm looking to hire a person who's excited to join a startup, so not afraid of a startup environment, and I'm looking to hire a product designer.
Okay, that's cool. So see, if you think that you're for the job, talk to her. Anyone else? Yeah, stand up so we can see you. Complex products? Yeah, and also enjoy startups. Startups? What is your name? Gabby, okay. Check out cast.ai. Okay, cool. So look for Gabby later. Stick around after everything, and then people can come to you. Who else? Yes, over there. Hey.
I'm not looking for a UX designer, I'm looking for something better. A UX writer.
UX writer, wow. Amazing.
If you're passionate about the English language and making all those beautiful designs work because they're dead without the right words,
Yes.
come to me, I'm Ashley.
Maybe next time we can have you for a talk about UX writing. Okay, Ashley. So talk to me later. Okay, cool. Okay, anyone else? Last opportunity. Oh, at the end there, yes. Which company? Shark? Okay, and what's your name? Ah, okay. What is your name? Orinas. Okay, so talk to him later at the end. Moving on. So this is the agenda for today. We're going to have 3 talks, and at the end we'll have a social cafe. I'm going to explain about that a bit later. And this is our three amazing speakers for today, so I really want to thank them for, he's blurry, very blurry speakers. Okay, interesting. Okay. So social cafe is a thing where we do at the end of the event. As we stay, this was happened, I think, 2 times ago. Standing in circles and getting to know people, speaking about UX. And this is a great way to network, to get to know people, perhaps get new friends or land a job. So stay at the end for this social cafe. Tomorrow, we're having a design systems workshop with Neven, who is here, the last speaker. And there's still room if you guys want to join. It's really going to be a fascinating workshop, going deeply in how how to organize design into a system and create communication through that, collaboration through that. Okay. Also, at the end of November 28, we have Vitaly coming back. And actually on November 27, I believe that's the event in Kaunas. And then he's coming to Vilnius for the Design KPI workshop. I just want to play a short clip from this workshop. Let's see. It will not go. Let's see. Can you press play there?
Let me ask you something. How would you measure design? Or more specifically, how would you measure the impact of your design decisions on the end-to-end customer experience or user experience? How would that work? Now, sure enough, we have all the business metrics, right? All the business KPIs, all the OKRs and SMART goals and data analytics and data science and all of that. So we can use that, right? Yes, but how do we apply it exactly? Or more specifically, how do we transform or translate all of those things into something actionable, tangible, practical, something that we can actually use in our day-to-day design work? How would it inform and guide our design decisions exactly? Well, we can do that with design KPIs. Over the last couple of years,
I will stop it here because we are short on time. But if you want to see the full video, come to the UX Salon events website. It's basically a really great workshop. I was already in this workshop. It's about quantifying design decisions by looking at data. And that's really hard to do. And there should be a certain skill to know how to do that correctly. So it's a great workshop, and I invite you to come to UXSalon/events, and there's an early bird tickets right now for this. Okay, so if you want to keep in touch on Instagram, on Facebook, UX Salon Vilnius to see the next events, announcements, no facts. So that's it. Thank you. Thank you for attending, and I want to welcome our first speaker, Agne. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Wow. Jonas was asking me 10 minutes earlier if I'm going to have animations and videos in my presentation. And because the theme of my talk is small and scrappy, I'm like, no. We're a startup. We don't have time for animations. So definitely going to talk about a pretty exciting and unique story. Well, not unique, but I'm the designer that started with one startup from First Designer. I was just designing their logo when they just came up with the name, and now I'm head of product in the same startup after 8 years. I haven't left, I've tried, but so most importantly, it's not going to be a talk just about my journey, because who wants to hear about somebody's personal steps in a career over 8 years? But I'm going to talk about critical points in the startup growth timeline and how you can make influence. So I think it all started with Hub Vilnius Facebook page, which was created in 2010. It seems like 1,000 years ago, but it's not that long ago. It's like 13 years ago. And this space had no startup ecosystem, no fancy buildings. It was pretty run down area. There was no lofts there. There was no backstage. There was just nothing. But there was Hub Vilnius. Facebook page was very active, and Mindaugas was just basically a glue that would attract entrepreneurs, wannabe entrepreneurs, and bigger businesses would be funding their meetup events. So they would gather in like I don't know, Swedbank's halls to host their talks. And their premises would definitely look small and scrappy. They would be getting furniture from businesses that were just getting rid of old stuff, and they were like, yeah, we'll take it. But the whole vibe was just so magnetic that from tiny space, this was like co-working space. Like, they didn't have designer offices at the time. There was no free coffee, no Wi-Fi. Well, there was Wi-Fi. You had to bring your own coffee, basically. And just all of these very excited, geeky people would be coming together, sharing their ideas, and using their Facebook page to get some, I don't know, something sold, get some connections. And like one of the examples from the bottom of their Facebook page, I had to literally use a filter to go through like the earlier years because there's so much information. It's like somebody's selling these very beautiful looking drawers in lite. Like, there wasn't even euros yet at the time. And that's like 10, 11 years ago. So it's not, imagine how fast everything changed. So through their Facebook page, I come across that Hub Klaipėda is opening. And at that time, I live in Northern Ireland after completing my uni degree in Liverpool. And I'm thinking, maybe I should go back to my hometown and start freelancing. And I was like, when I was on the phone to Justas, the owner of the startup, co-working place, I was like Labrador puppy. I was just completely overexcited. I'm like, I'm gonna come to this town. We're gonna do this. We're gonna bring so much energy. I wanna be part of this change. And he's like, yeah, sure. You know, like, now, after living several years in Lithuania, I realized that my tone of voice might have sounded a bit strange. So yeah, what a place of attraction for young entrepreneurs it was. And you know, majority of the effect that you see here obviously is done by the old phone that were there at the time. And this is 2012 summer. So it's like 10 years ago, like 11 years ago. As you can see from the furniture selection, it's very similar to Hub Vilnius, but this is like 2 years later. Like, Hub Vilnius was already booming at the time. They had like bigger premises. I think Vinted had some start there. I'm not sure. But yeah, in Hub Klaipėda, we shortly moved to bigger premises. In the old town, next to a strip club, I mean, it was like super exciting place to be. We were advertising our place in all kinds of international co-working place websites, and we would get people coming from Norway, from Finland, just all kinds of travelers would be joining just to share a desk space. And all of the companies that you see on the screen are still up and running up to this day, and I am involved with 2 of them, Watergraph and Go For Studio, which is an agency for design and marketing that I have co-founded. So this guy, Justas Malinauskas, is a co-founder or founder of Hub Klaipėda and co-founder of Watergraph, the startup that I'm gonna talk about today. And the sofa that we got for like 20 litas is still with us in one of the Klaipėda offices, and we said that we're never gonna get rid of it. So, first-time founder, he came up, you know, during like projects with clients, he came up with the idea that he wants to simplify marketing analytics for people and just make the data more readable, more accessible. So, as a first-time startup founder, he had a success rate of about 18%. And then if you put that together with the first-time product designer who has not even seen anything about product metrics, that success is definitely lower. So what is Watergraph? It's a marketing tech B2B startup, and it went through all of these regular stages of startup growth. So pre-seed round is where you find the painkiller, seed is when you sell that painkiller, and then Series A, which is where we are at the moment, is when you really try to build a much better product and a much better team, so you can reach Series B when you really need to grow much higher. So pre-seed round, we had 0 revenue. We were not even selling the product. We needed to validate the market fit. We needed to get interest and traction. And founder was doing most of the sales. So what can you do as a designer in such environment? So yeah, it would be thousands of requests like this. We need a logo, we need a banner, we need a business card, I'm going to this, I need a slide deck. And it would be always last minute. But yeah, I designed this logo in like 1 day. I'm like, here you go, you want it fast, and we still use it up to this day. First website, actually I think it's even a second website. Also, I'm not gonna go into detail, you can see how amazing it is, but it had a very clear, catchy color scheme, which we sort of continued through the years, and even that worked because we got recognized as a brand. So it's always fast, it's always one more thing, and every single request is like an Apple event. And look at this amazing interface that I have designed for the first time, which was basically a wireframe that I made in color that our CTO made. So this is how my journey started into product design, and I'm really surprised how I got here. But yeah, our collaboration would just look like this. I was doing something for the first time, not even knowing like what works, and Justas was just happy to get it on time. So if you're in the pre-seed startup, or if you want to join one, just don't overcomplicate it, just do it, and just like, yeah, it'll be fine. So how can you do it? So essentially you're supporting the founder by acting fast, listening, and really owning the design field. So even it's just brand colors, fonts, and just, I don't know, having the structure of your files, you're the owner of the design. And if you need to write a copy for the website, you will write a copy for the website. You don't have a copywriter or a UX writer even. And you really need to show the enthusiasm, because when nobody knows what they're doing it for the first time, everybody's doubting their idea, it's a very competitive market. Just showing that you believe in that idea is like a massive bonus for the team, because they feel the support. So general vibe in the pre-seed startup is like this. You all have your own vessel, you're paddling through it, you're all happy, but you need to put individual effort to get somewhere. Seed round. Seed round is when you start getting exposure from different news websites, portals, you get invited into talks. And this is where you get these rose-colored glasses with sparkle on, and everybody feels like a rock star, because like suddenly we're making it, we're big, and we have money, like it's a seed round. So yeah, you start spending it back sort of left, right, and center. And you do need to go through the first real challenges as a startup, when you actually need to start making money. So you need to modernize your product, you need to ensure that the monetization is growing, and you're sort of building a small sales team as well, which you need to also collaborate as a designer. And if you cannot keep a single structure for your files in Google Drive, you should not be buying expensive product management tools, because like it's so easy to get distracted with toys when you're in a seed round, because suddenly you have investment. You get distracted from the main thing that you should be doing, like building the product. And again, if you haven't defined business metrics and product KPIs, you should not start hiring, because how else are you going to explain to your colleagues what you need to do? So during the seed round, you need to really, as a designer, start thinking about foundations. So if the foundations weren't there in the pre-seed round, when you had no clue what you were doing, this is a time when you're just really getting real, and you need to learn about the craft, you need to understand how the business operates, you need to think about the values and like the non-negotiables that you need to bring to your team when you hire them, aligning on metrics, and so on and so on. craft part, not gonna get into that. It's sort of like very important for every single designer to be good at it. And the way I explain it to my team is like, yes, we all can do a little bit of validation. Yes, we can all attend user interview. Yes, we all understand, you know, how to, I don't know, like look up some product metrics, but you're the only person in this team that can actually produce design, you know, so learning the craft and making sure that you understand that your team talks in the same language is very important. So just, yeah, at that stage, make sure you get your team aligned. Well, at least to the baseline. And you need to keep it real, because in the seed round, there's so much noise, there's so much attitude as well. Everybody is very excited, everybody's very sort of confident. That you get distracted with discussions, you get distracted with your exposure and events, that you sometimes forget to even look at the performance. So you're thinking about the next thing that you're going to design, and you forget to look at the metrics of your product. So like, are users actually signing up? Like, are they staying with the product? Are they happy? Can they use the product that your team is making? And you need to start meditating, because honestly, in Cedron, this is when things get really, really fast. And it's very high dopamine stage of the startup. People are running around with different ideas. The co-founder or CEO starts panicking at multiple points of the journey. So you need to keep yourself calm, and you need to keep your team calm. Because, you know, it always feels like we're never going to make it to the next stage. Oh my God, we're running out of money. We're not making enough revenue. And you end up having absolutely no balance. So yeah, just really think about your body, about your relationships with people, because you can really get too immersed into startup life. Because this is what it feels like. So you're going from the canoe to this like shiny new boat. You have your team on board, but you know, you need some sort of skill to be able to operate at that speed. And you can go from this size to this size in 1 year, and it's not even the full team. So imagine how fast everything is going, and you need to change your mindset, because you cannot operate in the same way. So you're not longer, you cannot rely on the success methods that were working for you. And you get the biggest thing that everybody pops the champagne for, and you get the most exposure, which is Series A, so it's biggest rounds usually. So if your seed round is somewhere about $1 million, your Series A could be from like 10 million to 20 million and beyond. But you're expected to only make from 1 to 5 million as a startup. And it's obviously these numbers are changing. But your business focus is changing, so you really need to keep that product vision very strong. And now you have the sales team, so they need to be repeating the same thing over and over again. And because this is the stage where we're at, and we're moving towards the Series B, this is a lesson that I've learned right now, and actually the entire leadership team is going through it. So when you start thinking that, my team is kind of behind, we feel stuck, and we don't know like how to produce better results with the same people, the same mindset, and the same tools, that's already a little bit too late, because you should be thinking about training and upskilling your team way in advance. That means that it doesn't mean like you should be learning some very sort of craft-specific skill, but really thinking about bigger challenges and how your team provides value for the entire business, which is something that I think Mantas is going to talk about. But my point is that in every single stage, multiple times through that year, you need to be checking in the pulse of the business, checking in the pulse of your team, and investing very early into their growth, because you cannot expect to have a lot more customers but work with the same, let's say, customer support team. And then they would be applying the same methods that don't work in, I don't know, 10x environment. Same goes for design, same goes for engineering. You cannot start fixing foundations when you're already like really moving fast and you have a lot of customers that are using your product. So the thing is that this is not when you create, this is when you actually serve, I don't know, thousands of teams in our case. So over 1,000 marketing teams that they have about 10 users each use Watergraph daily. And we're talking like Dentsu, Disney Group, using our platform for their marketing. So like if something is not working, you know, we can be losing a lot of money if that customer churns. So you should be really expecting the change in the Series A environment. Is it? There we go. Yeah, you should be expecting the change of the slide as well when you click the button. So learn how to people. I use this word because it's like, it's not just the HR skills, it's not the management skills, it's not the training needs, but in general, you will have such huge team and people will be depending on you to really clarify what is it that we need to work on, how is my performance measured, how do you select the next hire, and how do you get the budget from your CEO. All of these skills are required, and like it's the science in itself, and it could be like a huge topic for another talk. And most importantly, during the Series A stage, because you're going through so many different topics at the same time, you work with so many people, and you're really expected some clarity and performance at that point. You need to practice individual discipline, and not just for yourself, but for your team as well. So that means that, yes, the team should be producing the result, but you should be, as an individual, you should be taking off the mental load of your team. One example that we had to apply when we hit Series A was just really training people to write Slack messages. Because, I don't know, a designer would be presenting their work and asking for feedback, and they would be writing this huge message that you would need to filter through and then discover what you need to do. And it's creating so much work for everybody else, rather than saying, hey guys, I worked on this is important, I need your feedback. And you just shorten it, and it's just so much faster. In our team also, done means done. So it's not just creating a task and checking it off, like let's say ClickUp on our side, but imagine my job was to present in this event. So it's not just the slides that I need to create, I need to sort of make sure that they work, I need to practice them, I need to make sure that I fit into the time. So it's not just the slides part. So done means that you go through all the steps in your mind to make sure, like, how are you going to share this information? What are the next steps? You know, what are the metrics that you need to think about? So it's a lot about it, a lot about mindset change. And obviously, if you have all of these when you are in pre-seed round, that's great. You know, you're already a winner because you have practiced these skills beforehand somewhere else, and you know how startup operates. So in Series A, you need to go have a laser focus, strong vision, clear roadmap, product performance. You need to know that it's performing. Because with all of the focus and all of the performance of your team, you can be hit by things like pandemic or economic crisis, where half of your customers start reducing their budgets. Because it's a B2B startup, obviously they're reviewing their budgets every year and how much they spend on tools. So you need to be ready for the unexpected all the time. Because yeah, so that's what it feels like. So you go from this shiny high-speed vessel, go on a pirate ship after being beaten a few times by life and by economy, And so you're not longer just like happy, cheerful, and speeding. You're really going through rough seas, and you have the team on board that you need to protect as well. And Series B, which is in progress, you need to have the ability to recruit and do it over and over and over again. And you need to be able to build over and over and over again and sell it as well. So you need to have proven tactics for every single aspect of your business that you can expand to like bigger markets and bigger customers. And by this point, consistency is the key. Because high-performing team does the same thing over and over and over again to be able to reach the best results. And there's one more slide left that shows the scrappy attitude of Watergraph today. So I opened the cupboard in our kitchen, looking for some salt, and I see this. So we don't even bother about buying some nicer looking designer salt dispenser. It's like, there's salt, it's open, you can use it. It's definitely not a priority for us at the moment. Here you go. And obviously our office doesn't look as bad as the hub business that I've shown, but there are definitely certain places where we deprioritize. So that was it, like a very quick, brief 8-year story of Watergraph growth. And if you are eager to ask any more questions, let's get coffee, hit me up on LinkedIn, and you can ask questions right now.
Ooh, testing 1, 2. Agne, thank you very much. I want to start by asking the audience, is there someone who is working in an early stage company and wants to ask Agne for advice? Maybe you're going through a struggle. All right.
I see 2 hands.
There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I'm not currently working with a startup I used to, but we spare parts sort of. But I have another question. You mentioned a lot about the investment and how it is important. So I was wondering, I was doing my research and didn't get much of information. Maybe you could give me an insight on how you search for investments, how you search for funding, specifically in Vilnius in Lithuania. So I was wondering, maybe there is some organization that's responsible and they provide certain information. Okay, thank you.
Yeah, so Lithuania has the great organization called Startup Lithuania, and it's basically an information hub for all of the places where you need to get started. There are several VC funds that you can contact as well, so I could be introducing them, but in general, Startup Lithuania would be your starting point, I would say.
Okay.
If that hasn't worked, then maybe we can chat afterwards.
Sure. Thank you very much.
Where was the second hand?
Somebody raising a hand there.
Gabia.
Hi.
Hi.
Thanks for a nice presentation. Can relate. I actually have a few questions. So one would be very personal. What's your biggest personal learning throughout this journey?
Wow, that's a great question. I think my biggest personal learning was to take ownership, personal ownership. So it was the time when there was, again, I use the slide, skip the drama. So it was the time when I was a little bit into what is happening, who's doing what, and not really fully pinpointing my role in the company so I can understand exactly that I'm also fully responsible for what is going on in the startup. So if there's something wrong with marketing team or with some other team or maybe some individual or maybe we don't have something, that I can bring it up and I could actually first start the conversation with that person. So learning to take ownership, I think was my biggest learning because I was for quite a few years kind of avoiding it. So I was like, yeah, you should tell me what I should be involved in. And I wasn't always leading the product, by the way. We had a few other people leading the product.
Okay, thanks. And next question will be a bit selfish and like 3 tips for scaling design team in a startup.
For scaling what?
Design team in a startup.
Uh, so I'm reading a really good book at the moment, which is called Good to Great. And it goes through, I think, like 70s, 80s companies. The first #1 rule is first who, then what. And I think that's the most important thing. So you really need to hire the right people that would be quite well adaptable to like a changing environment. And you need to put them in the right shoes as well. But the people and the hiring thing is, I think, way more important than learning how to scale it, because you will learn how to scale it on your go. But if you think that scaling is the main priority, that rather than really cherry picking the people, like, for example, not hire until you actually really find somebody, you could be not hiring for like half a year, you know? So I think that's one tip, and that's the only tip that I could get.
Do we have more hands? Ooh, yeah.
Oh, nice.
I mean, since you said you've been a designer from the very beginning, and you mentioned all these stages, so was it an instant realization that you're coming from this pre-seed to this seed round from like a designer's perspective? Because obviously, if you're the CEO keeping track of all the financial metrics, you know when you're making money.
Yeah.
But as a designer, does it just hit you, or?
So, great tip that we got from our advisors in the Netherlands when we hit Series A and I became the head of product was befriend your CFO. So, like, literally invite her for coffee multiple times, go through things, understand what is actually happening in the business. Because if you don't, then it would be like the next round might happen unexpectedly, you know. So then it's quite frustrating for the team if the company is not warming the people. Yeah. So I don't know if I answer your question, but
Kind of.
yeah,
Pretty much.
kind of.
Yeah. Thanks.
Good.
Agna, I have a question for you,
Okay.
if I may. So I'm guessing there's a bunch of designers over here, and you're hiring. Tell me about the best designer you work with. You don't have to do names.
I can share an example.
Don't do names, but
Yeah.
what made them great?
So I can share an example from today with one of our top designers in the team. So on Friday, we're having just a cycling challenge with my product team, who is in Vilnius at the moment. And I was so busy preparing for the talk, and I'm like, guys, can somebody create a route, right, for where we're going to go? Just in case we need to check it, we need to prepare, and so on. You know, just in case we don't, like, so we avoid doing it at the last minutes. One person says, I'll do it. So the ownership part is like, you could be just like Googling cycling routes and just creating a link and just inviting your team. But he personally tested 2 cycling routes in 2 evenings just to make sure that they're pleasant for everybody. He created a route on like an app, and then he made a Loom video explaining how we're gonna go there, which are the difficult parts, and so on and so on. Like, so for me, this is the best quality because you're thinking about your user, you're thinking about your team, and you're thinking about all the detail all the questions that you might get. So I hope that answers your question.
Brilliant answer, thank you. Can we do one more, or that's it?
We're out of time. That's it, we gotta move on because, thank you. I just want to say that some people, is there any empty chairs beside you? This is empty, vacant? Okay, so there are 4 chairs here. What about these? Yes, so 4 people. You're welcome to join here. Any more? Over there, there's some chairs. So welcome to go at the end. 2 over there. Okay, so moving on.
Moving on. I want to introduce the next speaker. So I want to say 3 things about the next speaker. Number 1, it's a fantastic family man. Number 2, He's an expert in 80s music. Number 3, I also consider him an expert in product design, and he's a staff product designer at Vinted. Please meet Mantas Sutkus.
Hello, everyone. So, product people, do you like to make products? I don't hear you. Still don't hear you. Do you like make products? Okay, don't shout me. Here the first time. So, hello, everyone. My name is Mantas, and I've been working for 12 years in product design. It's about a third of my life. So this question, it pops to me more and more the older I get. And you know, the answers are changing, but the question still the same, stays the same. And to answer that question, you know, I read books like everyone else, go taking some courses, watching movies, listening to some podcasts, and time from time I watch some YouTube videos of old interviews, and I stumbled upon this snippet of Steve Jobs answering that question. Answering that question.
Designing a product is keeping 5,000 things in your brain, these concepts, and fitting them all together in kind of continuing to push to fit them together in new and different ways to get what you want. And every day you discover something new that is a new problem or a new opportunity to fit these things together a little differently. And it's that process that is the magic.
Okay, so as much as I can relate to what Steve just said, but I do believe that it's still too abstract to understand what exactly he's saying. So let's take what he's saying. So we have, oh yeah, sorry. I'm gonna go back a bit. Yeah. So we have a head and the brain inside, and we have those things he mentioned. So for current product designer, what are those things? So let's get into the brain. So we have user-centric design, we have a business and market context, we have collaboration and communication in mind, and product vision, and there's always some legal compliance we have to think about, and there's also product strategy going on, but not forget about color coding and mobile dominance and usability metrics, and the list goes on and on. And this is really, I wrote them in like 5 minutes, but I believe there's much, much more to read that 5,000 Steve mentioned. So, okay, so we take all this complexity of the things that product designer needs to have in his head. And what we do with that is we try to fit them all together. We push them to fit together. We find new different ways to fit them all together. And then one day we come to work and understand that there's some new problem which brings a new opportunity to fit things a little bit different until we get what we want. And how do we do it? He says, well, that's magic. Okay, so what is that magic? And I'm going to come back to this question a bit later on, but before that, I would like to present you a bit of context, a short history lesson. And as I'm already using Steve Jobs, I'm going to be continuing using Apple for my example. I'm using it because I do believe that Apple was pioneer on many things, and it changed. I would say it did biggest impact in the industry of product design, and especially for me, because I was product designer in that industry. So let's go back in time to, not yet, a bit far away. Yes. So this is how it's called. I'm having a lot of problems with this thing. Yep. Works now. So this is the age of craftsmanship. The times when technology was married with liberal arts. At least that's what Steve used to say. So in front of that era was this person by the name of Scott Forstall. He was an old friend of Steve's who started working with Steve in the company called Next, which later on was acquired by Apple. He was responsible for creating operation system there. And the thing is that when Apple bought it, so we bought it to get to get Steve, and also whatever he was working back then. And that thing which we created at oh my God. I'm going to take a bit of water. Just look at this beauty, meanwhile. I'm going to be standing in that side, maybe that's my problem. Okay, so he was responsible for bringing that OS to Mac. It was called OS X, and he was principal driver bringing this Aqua user interface. Another project he was working on, he was leading the team who created iPhone operational system for the release of iPhone. So as you can see what he was doing and doing pretty good, he was championing skeuomorphism. If you don't know what is skeuomorphism, let's do a short of a quiz. Please take a look at this bottle of maple syrup. Back. And can you point out what is skeuomorphistic about it? Can you share why?
Because previously the bottles were bigger.
Yeah, that's correct. So ceramics were big, the handles for these liquids were big, and then we went to mass production, and we wanted to keep this familiar feeling, so we kept the handle. It's not needed, but it's there just for effect. What about this? Please don't you, but anyone else? Yeah. So skeuomorphism is really, there's a bunch of definitions, but at the end of the day, it's about bringing that functionality, effect, and so on from the old item and bringing it as a visual cue to the new item to just keep that familiarity. You want to change it? Okay. So I also would argue that I guess this chandelier is also made from plastic and covered in gold to make it feel metallic. That's also skeuomorphistic. So, next slide. Yeah, so as you can see, he did it pretty good for, I'm sorry, I lost what I was trying to say with this one. Can we go to next slide? Yeah. And it was not only about objects, it was also about some metaphors you could use. So for example, this is an example of feature which let users go back into the previous versions of your file. We called it time machine. So instead of making something simple, they came up with this, I can't imagine what kind of meeting it was. I guess like designers came and stakeholders are sitting like you now, and they're saying like, we're gonna make this thing like time machine, there's gonna be space, and at the end there's gonna be light, and all these files will gonna fly, in perspective. Can you play it?
If you can't find a file, and it doesn't even show up in Spotlight, just click Time Machine, and Spotlight will search the past to locate it.
So everything was possible back in the day. I feel strange without it. I'm gonna do this, okay? Okay, great. So what about things that were put that designers really had to have in their heads? Pixel perfect designs. We had full packages of folders of textures. We're really good at making glass effects and shading and so on. We were using Photoshop and Illustrator a lot. A lot of custom thinking. Like custom thinking was mainstream. And to sell these kind of time machine things, you really had to be good at storytelling. Back then, UX was not that used as a term, so we would say that's intuitive UI. Understanding of user behaviors was more about understanding if we will understand the metaphor, for example, trash can, delete, and so on. Knowledge of platform guidelines was similar. It was just two a bit more focused on visual part, and close collaboration with developers was very important because to make these crazy things, it was co-creation process together with developers, like both were important at that stage. What about pros and cons? Not working. So by using skeuomorphism, you would get familiarity, intuitiveness, rich visual appeal, emotional connection, and uniqueness out of the box. And what about the cons? So regarding cons, you would get complexity and clutter. Scalability was not great. It did at the end outdate. Technically, I won't go into details how we would cut in 9 pieces one button. Some then developers would somehow make them into one single button. Then definitely that's why longer production cycles, and it was much, much harder to become product designer or UI designer back then because of all those things we had to know before.
In iOS 6, we have built.
Yeah.
In iOS 6, we have built an entire new mapping solution from the ground up, and it is beautiful.
Yeah. So it worked. It worked. It worked for 6 years. It worked for 6 years. It was good for business. iPhone release was crazy good. It was good for the users. We loved this until it didn't. What happened with iOS 6, we released maps. And yes, this part, I guess, and that part looks beautiful, but everything, like content inside of it was terrible. So we were so focused on visual aspect of things that we forgot to think about the content, or we were just rushed. So what happens next is a really big backlash. Apple became a laughing stock. Like we never would get these kind of reviews that would say it may be the most embarrassing, least upscalable piece of software Apple has ever unleashed. After that, Tim Cook, well, not Tim Cook really, Apple wrote this apology letter and it had to be signed by Scott Forstall, but because of his big ego, as what we say in rumors and gossips, he didn't. So Tim signed it himself. He even had to suggest to use Google and Bing and all others and so on. Surprisingly, he left Apple. By the way, he did a lot of good job, but that's the thing which happened. Then the trends about, well, against skeuomorphism appeared. Then rumors about some kind of things happening at Apple where we're going to bring flat design and Johnny Ive is in front of it. So what happened really is Apple one day understood that we have a problem and we made it into an opportunity to fit things a little bit differently. And change came in the form of industrial design mindset, which was brought by this beautiful person called Johnny Ive. He was, in the beginning, first came as a hardware person. Like he was ruling all the hardware, all the Macs and so on. He was responsible for iPhones and Apple Watches, but he was never responsible for software design. So before that, I would really want to show you how much he loved hardware design.
A computer absolutely can be sexy. It's yeah, it can.
Yeah, okay, Jonathan. So he came from the school and philosophy of industrial design, like such schools as Bauhaus, influenced a lot by Dieter Rams, which was all about functionality, having simplicity and minimalism. So that's why iOS 7 released the way it was. And this is really a nice illustration of two totally different philosophies. This is iPad showing contacts. And on the left, Scott Forstall decided he wants to keep these black bars because if you would expand fully, the book would look strange. where Steve Jobs just said, yeah, we have a full space, so let's use it. So that's kind of totally different things. And it changed not only from the perspective that we changed from skeuomorphic UI to this flat UI. Overall, the thinking changed, that you need to stop thinking less from custom perspective, but more think systematically. And what about things then, after this change? Did something change in our brains? Well, yeah, they did. So all these skills like pixel perfect design, all the material glass effects, all the illustration, Photoshop knowledge, and so on, we had to put somewhere in the back drawer and forget, maybe for forever. We'll see. Spatial UI, maybe someday skeuomorphism will rise again. But for now, let's say in that change, it was not needed. So, but we got some new things. And those new things were system thinking. We got a lot of time on our hands, so we started to solve problems. No, we were solving before, but beautifully. So we got Lego to play with, and we were focused much more on research and automatically user testing. Additionally, we got standardization of design process and methodology, because back then it was pretty wild. Focus on accessibility. Goodbye Photoshop, hello Sketch and Figma, and collaboration communication switched. Like, we still talk to developers, but we now talk also with PMs and content designers and legal and many more stakeholders. Regarding pros, we got usability, consistency, PM's really happy about efficiency in design and development, scalability, and this one was very important for business, because we could hire much more easily people, because there was really big need of talent, and it was much easier to get into the field. Cons, well, there was a loss of individuality. This systematic thinking kind of affected creativity. There's also over-reliance on established patterns. You don't see a lot of these cozy, homey feeling apps. And every company now needs to have a design system. So still, this change happened in 2014 or something. And now we're here. Not much change, I would say. Johnny Ive left. I remember I was waving him with my tunnel syndrome in my wrist from all these shitty mouses he built. Like, no, but this is only bad thing he did. Like, he never did a good mouse, but all other stuff he did was amazing. So whatever, I wish him luck. He was one of the best influences in my career. So regarding Apple, Apple sees good numbers, we have good phone, how much good it can be. Tim Cook is not creative person, he cares that supply chain is working. I guess he's happy now. Overall, we'll see what's gonna be next. So what about that next? Well, I would say that the future for us will be beautiful. I'm kidding. It's going to be terrible. In reality, I don't know. I really don't know, and I don't want to guess, but looking at what Apple is doing, so regarding this, I'm going to keep my opinion for myself. Maybe. Who knows? Apple usually don't do such big things without some promise, but I don't know. I'm going to reserve myself on this. But if we talk about this, yeah. So Apple is stepping up again really a lot now. We're investing a lot of money, hiring big talents with newest release. If you haven't seen, Siri got smarter by quarter. That's a lot. This thing, if you saw, this using machine learning. So what I'm saying is AI and machine learning is not only about ChatGPT. You can look wider in these things. So this I would check a bit. But this is one of the things what I'm talking about. So what I'm saying is that things will change. again. And what we can do, we can embrace it. If you're going to ask me how, well, sorry. We can, put new things into our brains. And will it solve anything? Maybe, in a way. But will it be enough? I don't think so. What I do think we should care about is what happens in our heads. And in those heads, we have, mindset. The mindset which is ruled by principles, which makes those things into something. So what I'm saying is things change, but the principles will stay. So I would like to share now my principles, not some company principles, not design principles which were written in Norman Nielsen article. I'm talking about my principles, specifically my principles. And I'm going to share how I define them. So I was watching this movie called Air, and I'm going to put it back. And in one of the first shots, we were showing office, and there was printed picture of these Nike principles. And I paused, and I looked at them, and I started to think at each of them through the question I was asking before, like what it is to design a product. And I was interpreting each of these principles into connecting to the answers I had before. And it landed, it connected to me fully. So what I did, I just took these Nike principles and I made them into my key principles. You get the joke? Like my key principles. Thank you. I'm a dad. So let's go through them. So very quickly. What I want to say is, product designers are agents of change. We envision the change, we create and sell the change, we adapt to change. So world changes, new technologies appear, opinions change, and so on and so on. Doesn't matter. This is part of our business. This is part of what we do. Change is fine. I do believe that design is not a passive discipline. It's a proactive craft. So I would recommend to think about it not only tactically, but also strategically. But that's for another topic someday. Regarding this one. So I agree, and big yes, and also big but. But after you know all the processes, after you understand all the methodologies, you apply them, try them, and you are really good at it. Like Picasso said, learn the rules like a pro, break them like an artist. Beautiful. This is a thing that it's not enough to envision the design. You have to craft your skills in negotiation, persuasion, framing your reasons to make that project land with the stakeholders. Do your homework, do the research, talk to users, validate all the hypotheses, don't jump to solutions too soon. Do your homework. This is one about expand your horizons, expand your knowledge beyond design. This will help you enrich your decisions and make more inclusive designs. This one is very important. Just because you designed it, it's not enough. It needs to work. It needs to bring that outcome you were trying to achieve. Then the job, it means done. And this one, this is pretty self-explanatory. I'm just going to quickly pick these two. Bureaucracy. Johnny Ive left at the end because of this. And personal ambition, Scott Forstall left because of this. All others are self-explanatory. As much as I do believe that we need to know how to provide feedback, I do believe that it's much more important to know how to receive feedback. And I'm talking about like creating around yourself this feedback culture. Because from the feedback, your designs will evolve, and you also going to evolve as a designer. And this one is not really a principle. We had it as a 10th, but I do think it is like conclusion of all these things said before. I really do believe in that, that if you're going to have a good problem and you have a good solution and it works in your product, it's going to be so much easier to make business out of it. So these are my key principles. And what I would like to recommend is to create or find, like I did, your own. And it's very important to know yours. And why? Because understanding your mindset is more important than understanding those things. Because the mindset is the thing that makes something working out of those things. That's it. Sorry. I remembered, I don't have time? Nah,
you do.
Okay, that's it.
You do.
It's
All right, a round of applause for Mantas.
I hate this thing. This is not Apple login. Yeah, fuck that.
Quite enjoyed being a clicker. Mantas, since we don't have too much time for questions, I have one for you. You talked about phases, different phases in your life as a designer, and also, well, you used Apple. In which of these phases were you the happiest of all designers?
I'm gonna be cheesy and say when my kids were born.
Good. We can have one question from the audience. There we go.
I think that person was first, but Valeria, sorry, we can talk later. Yeah. No, we're co-workers. We can talk tomorrow.
Oh, okay. So I was wondering, you said a lot about the evolution of design, but I was thinking about like the evolution of the designer. So not in corporate terms, but in your own opinion, what is the line that separates like senior product designer from everybody else, from like before stages?
Yeah, so I think there's always this misconception. What I see is a vertical thing where I'm gonna have this competence and I'm gonna have this competence and that level and that level, and it's, higher. Problem is that designers need to think more like it needs to go a bit wider. So if you are like, I don't know, working as a senior designer who worked only in one team, a bit strange how you're senior because you don't know what's happening around you. So it's all about expanding your knowledge. So working with teams, working around the company, taking some not only products, by the way, you can take it, fix design processes, go outside and like functional design problems, take and so on, just to show that you're like more than just this, but also wider.
Okay, thank you. So it's like it's about broadness, like it's about
together with this, yes, but both. I'm just saying that too.
Well, thank you. I agree.
Thank you.
Thank you all very much. Thank you, Mantas. And last but not least today, we have Nevin, who's originally from Austin, Texas, but yesterday he flew in from Barcelona. You do the math. Evan is a designer and an educator, and today he's going to talk to us about design systems. And tomorrow he's going to run a full day workshop, same topic, design systems. So sign up, not too late. Enjoy. Evan, stage is yours.
Okay, yeah, so tomorrow I'm doing this workshop on design systems. Design systems is kind of a big topic for 30 minutes, and it's already the case that we're running a bit over, so I'm going to try to condense this. And we're focusing just on one particular thing within design systems, which are design tokens. I do have a question before we start. who in the audience works with some kind of design system at your work already? A lot. A third, okay. And then within that group, do you work with something called design tokens? Do you use this vocabulary? Yes, somewhat. I see a couple of shaky hands. Okay. All right, so even though I'm last, I sort of have the dry technical part of the evening. There's no big ideas here. We're gonna zoom into some really little tiny things and try to make it interesting. Since I'm at the end, we do have a little bit more interaction in this one. So hopefully that will kind of keep everyone, I'm having the same problem, awake. Can I do the same skeuomorphic clicker? Yeah, all right. It's not working. It's okay. Okay, so the reason we're talking about design tokens is we really only have 30 minutes. And compared to design systems, I think the world of, you can hear me okay, right? I sound weird to myself. Okay. The world of design tokens, I think of as like a little microcosmos within the world of design systems. Most of the questions that we might ask ourselves when we're working with design systems are already at play with design tokens. Click, thank you. So for example, there's all these different kinds of things, right? We could be thinking about the different visual design elements that are in play in the design work that we're doing, although design systems can be about much more than visual design, but this is an important part. As soon as we're thinking about design tokens, we're already thinking about the names of things, like what words do we use to describe the things that we are working on, and how do we share in that vocabulary. With design tokens, we're also starting to think a little bit about implementation. This connects back to the last talk a little bit, but if maybe I'm getting a little bit ahead of myself. Do you all know what a design token is? Sort of. Yes. Yes. Who's missing this? I'm going to give my simplest available answer, which is the design token is like a representation of the smallest possible design decision. So it's like we use this color, or we use this size, or we use this amount of space, or the amount that a corner is rounded, exactly, thank you. Or even like the depth or spread of a drop shadow. Or if you want to go back to the skeuomorphic days, you could include kind of gradient scales or different kinds of texture patterns as tiny design tokens. Anyway, so we're thinking about all of these things. We're thinking about how to organize them. We're thinking about documentation. And importantly, again, with design tokens, as with larger design systems, we're usually already having to think about not only how we document them, but how do we handle contributions, right? Like as soon as you're dealing with some kind of design system within an organization, there's often this question of, okay, I'm a designer working on this thing, and I look at stuff in the design system, and there's not something there that I know how to that I can use for this particular problem. I want to customize it. What happens in that case? And the same thing's true with design tokens, right? What if we're missing something from our color palette that we really need? Thank you. So from my perspective, within this world of design systems, design tokens are one of the foundational building blocks because they're these really, really, really small pieces that kind of build up into larger design decisions. I think principles are as well. I mean, we just got the My Key principles. I think that principles are really hard to do 30 minutes on, so we're going to stick with tokens for this. And I think that compared to principles, which I mean, yes, there's personal design principles that I agree I would encourage all of you to think about. Not just your design principles, but your work values and other things like that. But for an organization, principles kind of come over time. They're a little bit hard to set all in one session or one meeting. Tokens, on the other hand, I think are an easier place to start. So, clickery-do. Thank you. And the truth is that no matter how complex or what the aesthetic or brand or style of an interface is, as soon as you have a visual component to it, every single piece of it could potentially be made up of design tokens. And I do mean this genuinely. Like, I actually love that I'm coming after a talk where we had a lot of examples of more like photorealistic and skeuomorphic design. Like, even in cases where you are using those kinds of stylistic effects, those can be decomposed into their constituent parts, into smaller, tiny design tokens, whether that's like a little bit of noise that is used for the background of something to create a bit of a texture, whether that's a certain kind of drop shadow or a glossy gradient. All of those could be decomposed. And so that's what I mean when I say that any kind of visual design can, at least in theory, be broken down into these smaller pieces. Thank you. Okay, so what are we really talking about here? And I do have a few slides with some code on it, and I hope you'll just bear with me for that. I realize I'm at a UX talk, but we're going to look at the code anyway. I think that what we're really talking about, oh yeah, and I'm sorry it's getting cut off a little bit on that side. That was not my fault. I don't know whose it is. It's not anyone's fault. It's the screen's fault. It can be fixed. Ooh, thank you. Well done. On the fly fix. Okay, so what I think that we're really talking about when we're talking about these kind of very small, tiny individual design decisions that we could call tokens are something more like variables. And I mean that in the like true developer sense of the word variable. I think actually if I was working with a developer, they would probably, is there any developers in the house? What kind of developer are you, sir? Full stack, okay, love that. Anyone else? Yeah? Front end, great. Okay, so you two, it's only two of you, but who were brave enough to raise your hands. You can tell me, maybe you would even go so far as to say that these aren't variables, they're constants. Am I off? Yeah? Okay. For the design audience, we're just going to stick with the word variables. And not try to clarify. But a variable is really something very simple. It is a name that refers to something else. And in the context of design tokens, we're using them to refer to some kind of value, whether that's a color that has been stored, a size, a name of a font family, whatever it is. And I have these two examples of, okay, let's say we wanted to have a button that looked like this. Of course, this is not a fancy skeuomorphic button, otherwise the CSS would not fit on here. But we have this button here, and I have these two different ways that we could represent the design implementation of that button. And I want you to look at both of these. It doesn't matter if you can't really read CSS very well. I think that this is relatively readable on its own. You can kind of see there's a background color being set, a border radius, et cetera, et cetera. And I have a few questions that we're going to discuss as a group. So could we go to the next? Thank you. Okay, so this is my first question. And before you answer, I just want you to think for yourself. Of these two things, if you got over here, you can see there's like a hex code, a pixel value, a hex code, the names of the fonts, and some more things. And on this side, we have these like longer names that are inside of this fancy thing called var. Okay, ignore some of the syntax. My question for you is, of these two snippets of code, which to you is easier to read? Let's call them A and B. And don't answer yet, wait, just think for a second. I'm gonna ask for hands. So that side's A and that side's B. Okay, who thinks that side A is easier to read? Okay, and who's on B side? Okay. And could someone from side A say why they think it's, yes, please. Okay, so I'll repeat it. He said that just by reading it, he can imagine what the interface will look like. I'm assuming that means that you know how to read color codes like this? Okay. Great. And what about someone who thought that this side was easier to read? Want to say why? I don't want. Okay, I'll pick on you, even though you just spoke. Easier to understand in what sense? Okay, so it sounds like here you're saying that it's easier to understand the purpose of all of these values, and over here it's easier to understand what the value actually refers to. Am I off? No? Close. Okay. Okay. Let's go to our next question. There's a couple of these. Okay. So similar question, but I want you to try to ask yourself this, looking at both examples. Which one do you think is easier when looking at to recognize if there's been a mistake? Again, A and B. Think about it for a second for yourself. Which one do you think is easier for you to recognize if there's been a mistake? Okay, who's on side A this time? Easier to recognize a mistake. I see a few hands, great. And who's on side B? Easier to recognize a mistake in the code in side B. Okay, so someone from, I know there's very few of you, and I'm not going to give you my own opinion. So for side A, does someone want to say why you think it might be easier to recognize a mistake over there? I saw a few. Any volunteers? No? No one wants to defend it? Okay, yes, please. Uh-huh. Okay. So you're thinking that because this is like a concrete number, 5, that if you saw, okay, something looks off, then when you go and look at this code, it's easier to identify that like, oh, it's because we put in 6 instead of 5. Am I something like this? Okay. What about someone who was over on this? I know there were a lot of you, but someone new? Yeah, please. Okay, that could happen. I haven't included that in this example, but yes, if your text editor knows about these different variables, it could be even easier to recognize because it could give you one of these squiggles to say like, hello, that's not a variable name that you can use. Okay, great. Okay, yeah, so there's something about the names here that also hint at whether this is an appropriate use of them, right? Like there's a language that's kind of being adopted in this one. Very nice. Anyone else? Yeah. I love how actively participating you are. You've asked a question to everyone. Go ahead. No, I mean that genuinely. I know, now you get to give your idea. Yeah, I think you're right. I think that there could be hints, right? That if you like, let's say that we had our button and we gave it a background color that was like color card, something like that, right? That could be a bit of a smell, like something might be wrong there. You know, there could be a little bit of an odor, like that's probably the color that was meant to be used on cards, not necessarily on buttons. So that could help us like recognize a mistake. I agree with that. Okay, let's go to our last question. Okay. Now, this one is a little bit more philosophical, okay, but I do want you, it's the same two examples, but which one do you feel, and this is very subjective, I know that, which feels to you like a better description of the design of our button up here? What feels more like a good, accurate description somehow? You can use whatever criteria you want. Who's on this side? Better description. Feels better. You can imagine however you want, just that you, like, think of it this way. We're writing code to describe how this button is meant to be shown. That's literally what the job of the front-end developer is, right? So this code has to describe that. It has to describe it to the computer, and it has to describe it to the people writing and reading the code, let's say. So that's my question is, which of these do you think feels like a better description of the interface that we're aiming for. And who's on A? Be proud, A's. There's not very many of you. Okay, okay. I'm worried that you just think that I have an opinion in one way. Who's on B's? Team B? Okay, and who's like, I don't care? Okay, okay. I thought there might be some of those. Great. Anyone? Okay, let's just go with side B. Why do you think this might be easier to? Yeah. Might feel better. Mm-hmm. Yes. Okay, sorry, I'll repeat the answer. So, thank you, Avi. So, his answer was, here, there's a more constrained set of options, right? We've given names to a particular set of colors, numerical values, fonts, font sizes, whatever, that we can use, and that sort of embodies our system as a whole, whereas the flexibility over here is much more close to infinity. Maybe it's not infinity, but like we could literally put like any name that's available in Google Fonts over here, or we could put any of, I forget exactly how many, something like 64K color codes in there, right? So this has more, why does that make it feel more like a better description though? That's my question. Okay, easier language to learn. All right, any other points of view on this? Okay, I like this one. I'll repeat it and interpret it a little bit. This one has a stronger sense of like a shared vocabulary, that there's like an easier way to imagine that no matter what member of the team that we're talking about, whether it's a designer, PM, developer, whatever, that we could potentially all share this kind of language, right? That, oh, we want to use the UI font family. Oh, we want to use the action color. Right? That could be a much stronger shared vocabulary. That might make it more descriptive because more people can join in using that vocabulary. Okay, good. Let's, oh, yes. You have another reason? Yeah. Yes. Yes. Okay. That's a really good point. In some ways, we could describe this as a better description because it's more abstract. This is an abstract description of the design, and if we ever go in and decide that we're going to use a different action color, this description will remain true, even if the action color changes from this particular shade of green to more of a forest green, for example, or if we go through a rebranding. I'm filling in some of the gaps in what you were saying, but am I close to your point? Okay, great. Yes, and I want to go back to that first question just really, really briefly. I think the reason why, intuitively, this looks, especially for designers, like it's easier to read at first glance, because more of you answered the first question that way, is because these are concrete values. These are exactly the kinds of things that we're used to seeing in the sidebar in Figma. Hi, Figma. Thanks for joining. These are the exact same kind of things that we're used to seeing in the sidebar in Figma while we're designing, right? And so these are literally the concrete values, right? This is much more abstract. Now, it has a lot of advantages, but that is one of its cons. As soon as you move into a more abstract system of naming these things, you are creating a separation between the concrete design decisions, which are what does this color look like, what size is that thing, what is the amount of rounding on that radius, to a little bit more abstract space. The advantages of doing that are what a lot of you have brought up so far, right? Like more shared vocabulary, easier like set of things that can maintain some kind of consistency across stuff, etc. Okay, let's get away from the code. Next thing. So what are some of the benefits of this? And I think that it's not just from a developer point of view, although I wanted to start there. There's a lot of design benefits to thinking about design in this way. First of all, constraints lead to fewer decision points. This was something that came up like during the examples. If we have a more defined set of choices that we can make, we don't have to make as many decisions while we're deciding what is the best way for this thing to look, right? A reduction in an available color palette allows for less time fiddling between like really nuanced details between those colors, which could translate into more time being spent thinking about, I don't know, some other more important usability issue or product market fit issue or what have you. In general, having that reduced set of tokens tends to improve consistency. That's kind of the obvious one. But it also tends to improve coherency, especially if you come up with a naming system for tokens that hints at how that design decision is meant to be used. Like we saw like a color that's meant to be used for actions, right? That's not just consistency in terms of visual appeal. That's a kind of coherency, as in there's like an implied under-the-hood logic for our users where they can start to decode and understand what are the signals that they're getting from this thing that they're interacting with that tell them what they can do with it and what and how and why. And that kind of leads to this last point, that consistency and coherency in general should over time enhance the user experience. Like the way it typically enhances the user experience is by improving a user's ability to instantly recognize and understand what they're able to do in the moment presented with some kind of user interface. Click. So, big question, how do we work with design tokens in Figma? Warning, I gave this talk originally before Figma announced variables, so I'm going to go through both of these very, very quickly. Click. So first of all, there's kind of the like now old school way in Figma, which we still need for some things. But there's color styles for sure, and color styles can be organized by family and by hue intensity. We have text styles. Text styles, unfortunately, are not something that really represent individual design token decisions, because as soon as you set a piece of type, you are actually making a lot of different design decisions, whether you think about it or not. There's the size, there's the font family, there's the line height, there's the weight of the font, there's whether it's italic or not, there's whether it's in all caps or not, does it have some kind of decoration like an underline or a strike through, la 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 la, okay? I won't go through all of them, but there's really a lot of possible design decisions that go into just a simple piece of text. And the way Figma does text styles, I would not think of as being a replacement for design tokens. They're not those individual decisions. So it often makes sense to organize text styles in some kind of folder-like way to mimic the idea of these like smaller, more atomic design decisions. For example, for different like use cases like body display and heading, for different sizes like 2XL or 3XL if you have some kind of sizing system in place. Or like in this case, I have this font that I use in two different widths, a narrower set and a wider set. Those have to be kind of accounted for in some way. And then there's, of course, effect styles. Let's go to the next slide. Then there's spacing and sizing. And I think this is a really, really interesting one. Until we got variables like officially baked into Figma, which are a huge deal, especially for this kind of thing, what I would have said as a practical suggestion is like bake sizing and spacing into your components primarily. This is like the best way to do that in Figma. One thing you can do is like if you use a sizing system or a spacing system that's based on multiples of 8 or multiples of 4, something like that, adjusting this big nudge in Figma helps a lot with that because you can just kind of hold down the shift key and use the arrow keys to jump the numbers up and down. But these days, we have like some better ways to do it. So let's go to the next thing. Okay, I'm sorry this is a little blurry. I'll try to kind of point out what's going on. Variables are a big thing. Who's played with these yet? in Figma? I'm sure a lot of you have. Config was only 2 months ago, but everyone seems to have tried this. Okay. So color variables are a really big one. And my practical advice here, and what's I think amazing about this compared to the support for design token-like thinking that Figma had prior to this update, is that you no longer have to have only one name for a design decision. Developers almost never do that. Like front-end developers, when they implement a design system, they usually give more than one name to the same thing. So there may be a name for a base color, and then a name for like, oh, sometimes we use that color for our link text, but sometimes we use that color for like an active button border or something like that, right? The same color could be used in 2 different semantic ways. And developers have long had the ability to keep track of those things in a way that we haven't. Except now we can. We can make, like, for example, a set of base colors with a name for all of these different raw color values, and then move up the ladder of abstraction into a way of thinking where we create a set of more semantically named or component-based color names that refer to those underlying base colors. That way we can use the same white for our canvas color as we could somewhere else for the background color for a like a ghost button or something like this. So this is a really big deal. I think if you haven't played around with it at this level of abstraction, I would encourage you to try it out. It has a lot of pros. Next one. Same thing with spacing and sizing. So this can now really be baked in. We can create a set of variables with names for like the certain like pixel or point sizes, whatever you want to think of it as. And again, I kind of have the same invitation for you to try out. It's like not just set up a base set of values, but use those values and give them more specific, more abstract semantic names. Like what I have here is like, I'm sorry it's so blurry, but this first one is like the padding on the badge, and it has an inline padding, which is set to size S, and a block padding, which is set to a different size. These refer to this like underlying set of raw number values over here. But this way of doing it gives me the flexibility to, for example, do something like using modes to support multiple densities within the same app. I know it's really blurry, but the columns there say relaxed, comfortable, and compact, just to give you an idea. So hopefully you can imagine with me that using these kind of semantic names for the spacing values, like saying, okay, for this component, we have like this particular gap, like a space between 2 things, or we have this particular padding. Encoding that in this way and referring to an underlying value, but then being able to say, okay, but when we want a more compact mode, that shrinks, that gives us a lot more power of expression as designers, as user interface designers, right? Because user interfaces are not static things, they're flexible things. They can be resized, they can switch modes, all kinds of stuff. I'm sorry this is so blurry. I'll try to get a cleaner version when I send you the slides after this. Okay, continuing on. Before we close out, I have a few thoughts on naming and organizing. Next one. So first of all, I have some like broad strokes advice. There's generally 3 different ways that you could name tokens. Same kind of with components, but anyway, with tokens, I usually you'll see these 3 different approaches. Base tokens are a name that describes what the thing looks like, whether it's small or big, whether it's red or pink, for example. Semantic tokens start to describe how that thing is intended to be used, right? So it's already a more prescriptive name in a way. It's like the name has some kind of meaning behind that particular design decision, whether it's like the primary brand color or the default icon size. And then there are component tokens, right? So we might have like the primary button color or the button font or the default button icon size as examples of that, okay? And this again is why having that ability to like nickname one design decision with another name becomes so valuable, because we might have component specific names for a set of tokens that apply to more than one component. But we have the names for this particular component and names for another one. Next. More general advice about the anatomy of names. I generally recommend kind of thinking in this order, like what's the more general category that a token participates in, over to something more specific. So if we imagine we have a design system that's called Loom. Like this name, like in English at least, I usually read these kind of names backwards to check them because of how English works. So like, what's the hover state for primary buttons? Their background color. Right? I've named them in the reverse order because, like from more general to more specific, because then if I create like a list for myself of all of these things, I can look together at all of the things that are colors, or all of the things that are font related, or all the things that are size related. And then within that, I can look through all the things that are like related to some specific component or something like that. That's one of the reasons for this kind of like sort of reverse description naming structure. I'm going to leave this one at that. Let's go to the next one. And then just to give you some kind of visual idea of the things that you might be able to do with this, right? If you have a set of like well-documented and well-organized semantic color tokens, switching to the ability to support multiple color modes, whether that is light and dark or also like high contrast versions of those, which you might need for accessibility reasons, and if you're not thinking about the change in the EU law by 2025 around accessibility, you should start thinking about it or talking to your boss about it. Anyway, this is so much easier if you have a documented, well-structured, well-organized system behind your colors. If you don't, this is nearly impossible to do. Support multiple color modes. At some point, someone has to organize them into a system in order to support multiple modes. Whether you are involved in that or your developers do it without you, which might make it look very ugly. So I encourage you to think about how you could get involved in it, because it's usually an important part of most products. And then last one. Much less used, but still a cool feature and definitely good for accessibility, is being able to support multiple density modes. If you have some kind of sizing and spacing system, and there's like a logic behind it and a set of names behind it, supporting users in changing that density depending on what their like needs are or the context that they're in, also gets much easier. Next. Really quickly getting started. Next, I'm sorry, I know we're out of time. I have a few things to recommend. So first of all, there's lots of great examples of this already out on the web. These are 3 of my favorites. The Nord design system is for Nord Health. It's based in Helsinki. Their documentation about design systems, design tokens within their design system is great. Adobe has a lot of really, really detailed thought that they've put into both the naming structure and organization of theirs. And then Shopify is a kind of go-to standard. Everyone in the design systems field looks to them for examples. They're based in Canada, I believe. Next. And my recommendation for where to start is to start with whatever you have. I think that going in and trying to like make a whole big system is not a thing. Design systems are not a project. They're not something you take home and show up the next day at work with a design system. Like, that's nonsense. Start with your team with whatever you actually have. Map it onto some kind of system, like let's decide on some names for these things that we're all already doing, align around them, and don't be afraid to leave room in that system for room to grow. And I think that's it. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Nevin. That was wonderful.
Thank you.
So we have time for one question, and then we're going to move to the social event, to the social gathering. And okay, so there's a question here. Yes.
I'm getting questions from the other speakers. Great. No, go for it.
I just, because you know a lot about this, I just was wondering, can you feed tokens to machine learning?
Can you feed tokens into machine learning?
And then it learns and uses AI to build design for us?
I'm going to skip that question. Ask me that when we have a beer. Does anyone have anything that's not
Any more
about AI?
Okay.
Okay. Well, thank you.
I have a question for you.
Oh, yeah.
You started a button school.
Yes.
Can you tell me more about that? What's that?
Ah, okay. Yes, I was actually thinking about this a lot during your talk because, yeah, I mean, I'm building my own company right now. Like, I run Button School. It's a bootstrapped startup. We're based in Barcelona. Like, we are very narrowly focused right now on like offering courses that are aimed at helping designers level up in their careers.
It's online, so you sign up online and you learn.
It's online, but it like okay. So I have like 10 years as an educator under my belt at this point. I have very strong opinions about how education happens. I like having it online because it means that I have like a very international like group of students in every class. But all of our classes are like live online. Okay, like it's interactive, it's active learning, it's hands-on kinds of things. It's one of the reasons why I'm excited to do the workshop tomorrow because I can actually do it in person with I think some of you are here. But yeah, that's how it works. Like we're kind of dedicated not to making like yet another set of video tutorials that you like pay for and sign up for, and then it's up to you whether you actually watch them or get anything out of it or not. Like we have like very facilitator-led. You know, you're with a cohort with peers. That's what we do.
Okay, sounds interesting. Thank you. So thank you for the presentation.
Thanks for having me.
And thank you all for coming today. Thank you for Vinted. I welcome all to stay, and we will have that social event. Maybe you can play the last presentation, the last slide of my presentation. But if not, if you can't stay, thanks for coming, and see you next time.